My hands went numb the moment my father called me a thief. The words landed hard in the yellow-white glow of the pendant lights over his marble kitchen island, sharp enough to make the crystal glasses tremble when he slapped a manila envelope onto the stone. The house smelled like cedar garland and expensive candles, but the Christmas tree in the formal living room behind him was dark, its ornaments dull in the half-light, like someone had already decided the season was over. My brother Derek stood near the sub-zero refrigerator with both hands braced on the counter, jaw flexing. My sister Paige had her phone halfway raised, her glossy lower lip parted, mascara-dark eyes darting between my face and our father's. Judith Klein, the company bookkeeper, sat ramrod straight at the breakfast table, smoothing the silk scarf at her throat with 2 trembling fingers. And Richard Ellison, my father, 6'2", silver at the temples, cashmere quarter-zip, wedding band from a marriage that had ended in a cemetery 14 years ago, looked at me like he'd finally found the stage he wanted. "She froze the reserve account," he said, louder this time, for the room and for the performance. "That's why Christmas is cancelled." The silence that followed was absolute. "My name is Catherine Ellison. I'm 34. And this is the story of how I let my father cancel Christmas to hide what he'd stolen, and how my sister's Livestream gave me exactly what I needed to bring his whole empire down. I didn't reach for the envelope. I didn't defend myself. I stood there in my wool coat with the cold still clinging to the hem, watching him enjoy the first few seconds of shock he thought belonged to him. Derek pushed off the counter and took a step toward me. "Are you serious right now, Kate? Payroll is due next week." His voice had that clipped, superior edge he borrowed from our father years ago, but his right knee was bouncing under the granite overhang. He always bounced when he was scared. Paige lowered her phone slowly. "Dad said the bank called today. Please tell me you didn't actually do something like this right before Christmas." Judith finally looked up. "There are access logs," she said carefully. "Your credentials were used at 8:17 this morning." There it was, the pile-on, efficient, scripted, neat. Richard flipped open the envelope and scattered printed statements across the island. Bank headers, login screenshots, a grainy still from the office security camera showing a woman in a camel coat entering the accounting suite. "Me, or enough of me for the room. I told everyone money was tight," he said. "I told everyone we had to be responsible adults this year. No gifts, no dinner at the house, no staff holiday bonuses. And while I'm trying to keep this family business afloat, you decide to sabotage me because you're angry." He paused there, letting the accusation breathe. Because angry sounded irrational. Angry sounded female. Angry sounded like exactly what he needed me to be. I slipped my gloves off one finger at a time and set them on the island. "What am I angry about?" I asked evenly, specifically. His nostrils flared. It was a tiny thing, but I'd known him long enough to read the machinery underneath. He had prepared for tears. Maybe outrage. Not questions. Derek jumped in before he could answer. "Don't do that lawyer thing where you act calm and twist everything. We all know you've been sniffing around the books for weeks." "I'm a forensic accountant," I said. "Looking at numbers is not sniffing." "Oh my God!" Paige muttered, folding her arms. "You always do this. You make everything sound clinical." Judith kept her eyes on the papers. "The wire freeze originated from your device profile." "My device profile," I repeated. "Interesting." Richard leaned both palms on the marble and bent toward me, his cufflink catching the light. "Stop being clever. You've had a problem with my decisions since October. You didn't like that we scaled Christmas back. You didn't like that I asked everyone to tighten their belts. You didn't like that I said no to your little crusade about internal controls. So now our vendors are calling, our account is flagged, and the family is standing here because I'm done protecting you." I looked past him toward the unlit tree in the other room. My mother's glass icicle ornaments were still hanging in careful silver rows, but the ribbon I usually tied around the banister every year was missing. No music, no food warming in the oven, no wrapping paper under the tree. He hadn't just canceled Christmas. He had staged the corpse. Paige shifted her weight and tucked a strand of blonde hair behind one ear. "Dad said he was trying to keep things private," she said. "He didn't want to humiliate you." That almost made me smile. Richard pulled a pen from the envelope and slid a single-page document toward me. "You resigned from advisory access to Ellison Hearth and Home Tonight. You admit the freeze was unauthorized. You hand over your company laptop and keys. Then maybe we keep this internal. Internal, I said. Derek gave a humorless laugh. Take the deal. I picked up the paper, glanced at the first line, and set it back down. It wasn't a resignation. It was a confession dressed in family language. Outside, wind brushed the bare branches against the kitchen windows. Inside, the refrigerator hummed, steady and mechanical. I could hear Paige's acrylic nail tapping against the back of her phone case. Judith's breathing had gone shallow. Richard waited, chin lifted, enjoying the symmetry of it. His daughter cornered under holiday lights, the family arranged around him like witnesses in a painting. 3 months earlier, I might have still been vulnerable to the theater of it. 3 months earlier, I might have believed that if I could just say the right sentence, explain the right discrepancy, present the right spreadsheet, he would choose truth over control. But 3 months earlier was before I found the first transfer. It was before I learned that men like my father didn't lie because they were desperate. They lied because they thought the room belonged to them. I folded the confession page in half with deliberate care and tucked it back into the envelope. Don't worry, Richard said, mistaking composure for surrender. I've already spoken to Harold Voss. If this gets uglier, you'll be dealing with counsel. I met his eyes. You should. His expression changed. Just a degree. Enough. Derek scoffed. What is that supposed to mean? It means, I said, taking off my coat and draping it over the back of a chair, if you're going to accuse someone of financial misconduct in a room full of witnesses, it helps if the paperwork is real. Judith's head snapped up. Paige frowned. Kate! I took my phone from my bag, unlocked it, and set it face up on the marble between us. No rush. No flourish. Just glass on stone. Richard straightened. What are you doing? Correcting the story. Derek laughed too fast. You think you can just bluff your way out of? Actually, I said, and his words died there, you didn't cancel Christmas because we were broke. You canceled it because you needed everyone too distracted to notice where the money went. The room went still in a different way then. Not shocked. Waited. Richard recovered first. That's absurd. Is it? I tapped my screen once and turned it toward Paige. On the display was a paused video frame from her public livestream 4 nights earlier, Paige in a cream faux fur jacket, smiling too brightly, saying, You guys, wait until you see this insane holiday surprise. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago River in a slice of midnight blue. A 12-foot flocked tree glittered in the corner. On the marble console table below, a brass mirror set a Harlan's jeweler's bag, a silver ice bucket, and a stack of invoices clipped with a black binder clip. Paige's face drained first. That was deleted, she whispered. I saved it before it disappeared. Richard's mouth flattened. Derek glanced from the screen to our father. What is that? I zoomed in with 2 fingers. That invoice, I said, is from North Candle Events LLC. Incorporated September 12th. Registered agent, Vanessa Cole. Mailing address, Unit 18B, Blackstone Lofts, Wacker Drive. That same vendor received $182,000 from Ellison Hearth and Home in 6 separate transfers, labeled Seasonal Decor Logistics. Judith's scarf slipped loose at her shoulder. She didn't fix it. That doesn't prove anything, Richard snapped. No, I said. So let's keep going. I opened a PDF and slid the phone to Judith. These are the transfer authorizations. All approved using my device profile after Derek asked IT to reset my token on Monday. Derek blinked. What? I looked at him. You told Marcus and IT you needed access because I was in a client meeting. He logged the override. There's an email. Derek turned to Richard, so fast the heel of his shoe squealed against the tile. You said she. I said nothing, Richard cut in. You implied everything, I said quietly. Then I tapped again. The next file was a still from the office loading dock camera. 2 Ellison Hearth and Home warehouse employees wheeling boxed Italian light fixtures onto a rented truck at 9:43 p.m. on December 3rd. The delivery manifest listed them as damaged inventory write-offs. The truck GPS pinged 2 hours later outside Blackstone Lofts. Paige took a step backward until the refrigerator handle pressed into her spine. Derek stared. Dad! Richard's face had gone hard, the skin around his eyes tightening like wire. You've been digging through company systems without authorization. I'm a named beneficiary on the family holding trust and a minority equity partner under Mom's estate plan, I said. Authorization has never been your issue. Visibility is. Judith finally found her voice. Richard. He ignored her. I opened the last item slowly, letting my thumb rest on the glass for a beat. Deliberate slowness had a way of making liars itch. This one was an audio file. Richard heard his own voice before the others understood what it was. Move it before Catherine notices, he said through the speaker, low and irritated. Use the holiday line item if you have to. Nobody questions Christmas spending. The recording ended. No music. No static. Just his words sitting in the middle of that kitchen like a dropped blade. Paige covered her mouth. Judith collapsed backward into the nearest chair. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse than dramatic. Her knees simply stopped cooperating. Derek ran a hand over his face. You recorded him? No, I said. Vanessa did. Richard's head snapped toward me. For the first time that night, I saw it. Not anger. Not authority. Fear. That was the moment the room changed hands. He tried to bark over it. This is private family business. No, I said. This is fraud. The word hit each person differently. Derek went pale under his winter tan. Judith's lips parted, then closed again. Paige's eyes looked suddenly younger, rounder, the way they had when she was 8 and had realized adults could lie. Richard stood very still, one hand resting on the marble as if the house itself might tilt. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice had lost its weight. I picked up the envelope he'd given me and slid it back across the island. You wanted a confession. That was ambitious. He stared at it. I've already preserved the bank records, the transfer logs, the doc footage, and the recording. Naomi Sloane's office sent notice to the lender and our insurance carrier at 6:15. If anything gets deleted tonight, that becomes spoliation. If anyone contacts Marcus in IT, that becomes retaliation. If Judith touches another ledger, that becomes obstruction. Judith let out a small, involuntary sound. Derek rounded on our father. What did you do? Richard pointed at me without looking away from my face. She's trying to destroy this family. I held his gaze. No, I'm just ending your version of it. Paige's phone slipped from her fingers and clattered against the counter. Nobody moved to pick it up. For a second, the only light in the room came from the kitchen pendants and the cold blue reflection off the windows. The dark tree in the other room stood silent behind him, every ornament watching. Richard swallowed. What do you want? There are moments when power announces itself loudly. This wasn't one of them. This was quieter than that. This was the sound of a man realizing the door he locked from the inside had another handle. I want you to stop speaking as if the next step belongs to you. Then I put my gloves back on, lifted my coat, and headed for the foyer. Kate, Derek said, voice cracking at the edges now. You can't just walk out after dropping this. I paused by the front door and looked back at him. I'm not dropping anything. I'm scheduling it. Richard took one step after me. If you do this, there's no coming back. I rested my hand on the brass handle. That would only matter if I wanted to. Then I left them there, the patriarch, the heir apparent, the golden child, the bookkeeper, and the dead holiday he'd arranged like a threat, and stepped out into the December dark. They thought they'd cornered me in a kitchen. They had no idea the real room had already been booked. The next few days moved with the clean precision of a machine I'd been assembling in silence for months. People always imagine revenge as something hot, impulsive, emotional, a slammed door, a screaming match, a spectacular public collapse. What I learned that winter was that the most effective kind is cold enough to preserve evidence. I had known something was wrong in September when I agreed to do what I always did for the family business, fix a problem no one wanted to name. Ellison Hearth and Home wasn't some tiny mom-and-pop store with a single ledger and a sentimental history. It was a regional design and luxury home supply company with 3 showrooms, a warehouse in Elk Grove Village, a commercial installation division, and more than 80 employees whose mortgages depended on the illusion of steady hands at the top. My mother had helped build it from a single storefront in Winnetka before she died. After that, Richard took over the story and rewrote the tone. He turned warmth into image, tradition into branding, family into leverage. By October, the vendor payments had started to itch under my skin. Round numbers where there should have been irregularities. seasonal decor charges that were too large and too clean, expedited delivery fees billed on days when no freight ever moved. And then the new vendor name, North Candle Events LLC. It sounded plausible enough to slide past anyone moving too quickly. That was the point. I didn't confront him then. Confrontation is what guilty men prepare for. Instead, I traced IP addresses. I traced filing dates. I traced signatures that looked correct until you saw how perfectly they sat on the line. I traced approved purchase orders to loading dock footage and delivery scans and driver logs. I traced a shell company to a woman named Vanessa Cole, an interior stylist with tasteful branding, 200,000 followers on Instagram, and a professional history that intersected with our holiday showroom launch the year before. The first time I saw her name, I thought it might be vanity spending. A private site arrangement. Something ugly but containable. Then Paige went live. It was a Thursday night. I was in my condo in Lincoln Park with my laptop open, eating takeout soup over a spreadsheet when my phone buzzed with a notification. Paige Ellison Live. She almost never went live without warning. Paige curated her life with the intensity of a jeweler setting stones. Everything was soft focus and timing and affiliate links. So when I tapped in and saw her flushed, breathless face filling the screen, I knew immediately this wasn't planned. "You guys," she was saying, laughing into the camera. "I'm literally not supposed to show this yet, but Dad surprised me with the craziest holiday content location, and I need opinions." She spun the phone around. At first it was just wealth. Black-framed windows, herringbone oak floors, creamy boucle, chairs arranged in front of a gas fireplace, a kitchen with veined marble and brushed brass hardware. But then details started surfacing through the gloss. A delivery tag with our warehouse code, a cluster of custom stockings embroidered with V, R, and a small gold C that made no sense in Paige's world. A Harlan's jeweler's bag near an unopened bottle of Veuve. A permit packet lying half under a coffee table book, just visible enough for me to pause and enlarge later. Then a man's reflection crossed the mirror behind her. Not fully, just enough. My father's shoulder, his watch, the angle of his jaw as he stepped into frame, and then back out again. Paige must have seen the comments explode because her smile faltered. "Okay, wait, stop being weird," she said too quickly, then angled the camera away. In the background, a woman's voice laughed and said, "Richard, let her have her moment." Paige's face changed. Not much, just enough to tell me she hadn't known that voice would be there. The stream ended 13 seconds later. She deleted it 3 minutes after that. But I had already recorded the screen. I spent half the night going frame by frame. The permit packet bore the Blackstone Lofts letterhead. The unit number matched Vanessa Cole's business mailing address on the LLC formation I'd found 2 weeks earlier. The Christmas styling invoice on the console table matched the charge code that had been buried in our seasonal budget. And the reflection in the mirror, blurry as it was, carried my father's Cartier Santos watch, a retirement gift my mother had given him, inscribed on the back with the date of their 10th anniversary. That was the moment I stopped asking whether he was hiding money. The question became how far he'd gone, and who he was willing to bury to keep it hidden. I didn't call Paige. I didn't call Derek. I didn't call Richard. I called Naomi Sloan. Naomi had once taken apart a manufacturing CEO in federal mediation, so methodically that the man agreed to terms before realizing he'd just surrendered control of his own board. She was precise, expensive, and unimpressed by family mythology. She listened to me for 12 minutes, asked 3 questions, and said, "Do not confront him. Preserve everything. Come in at 8. By the following Monday, I had a secure archive with mirrored backups, a lender notification strategy, a draft petition for forensic access under the trust agreement, and a private investigator named Luis Ortega who smiled like a tired saint and noticed everything. We moved quietly. Luis photographed deliveries. Naomi preserved records. I let Richard think he was still directing the weather. That was the part none of them understood at the kitchen island. They thought I had been snooping. In reality, I had been building a room they couldn't talk their way out of. The conference suite at Sloan and Mercer overlooked the river from 22 floors up, all smoked glass, dark walnut, and leather chairs that were just a little too deep, designed to remind people the table belonged to authority before anyone said a word. Winter light spilled across the polished surface in pale stripes the morning we met there, bright but cold, turning every silver pen and water carafe into something surgical. I arrived 10 minutes early with Naomi and Luis. Naomi wore charcoal wool and no jewelry except a watch with a black face. Luis had 3 banker's boxes, a laptop bag, and the calm expression of a man who had seen far stranger lives than ours. I wore navy. Simple. Structured. No armor except clarity. Richard arrived 3 minutes late, which meant he was trying to re-establish dominance. Derek followed him in a suit that had been pressed badly, as if he'd slept in it or thrown it on from the floor. Judith came next with a leather tote clutched to her chest and eyes that looked rubbed raw. Harold Voss, Richard's attorney, stepped in after them with the bored confidence of a man who expected settlement and gossip, not disaster. Paige came last, carrying no phone at all. That was how I knew the last 72 hours had changed her. She didn't take the seat beside our father. She sat 1 chair away from Derek, hands locked tightly in her lap, looking at the grain of the table as if it were safer than anyone's face. Richard noticed. Of course he did. Control lives in distances. "Can we begin?" he said, voice clipped. Naomi didn't even sit until everyone else had. Then she opened a thin binder, placed it squarely in front of her, and said, "We can, although I'd like the record to reflect that this meeting is being conducted for pre-litigation resolution purposes and that all preservation instructions previously sent remain in force." Harold gave a dry smile. "A little theatrical, Naomi." "No," she said. "Thorough." Luis distributed folders 1 by 1. Thick, tab numbered. I watched Derek's throat move when he realized there were more pages than he'd expected. Naomi folded her hands. "Mr. Ellison, over the last 10 weeks, my client has documented unauthorized diversion of company and trust-related funds through a shell entity called North Candle Events LLC. We are prepared to present evidence of fraudulent transfers, false vendor reporting, asset concealment, retaliatory employment action, and attempted coercion of a beneficiary under the Ellison Family Trust." Harold's expression didn't collapse all at once. It thinned first, then sharpened. Richard leaned back in the leather chair, one ankle over the opposite knee, performing ease with the effort of a man holding a cracked vase together. "That's absurd." Naomi nodded once to Luis. He clicked a remote, and the wall monitor came alive with the first slide, a clean timeline headed Ellison Hearth and Home Diversion Schedule. September 12th. North Candle Events LLC formed in Illinois. September 15th. Registered agent, Vanessa Cole. September 19th. First transfer from Seasonal Decor Reserve, $24,000. October 3rd. Second transfer coded as vendor staging reimbursement, $31,500. October 21st. Warehouse inventory reclassified as damaged, transferred off books. November 18th. Family notified of cash flow pressure and cancellation of holiday expenditures. December 3rd. Private delivery to Blackstone Lofts, Unit 18B. December 7th. Public live stream from unit captures concealed assets and associated documents. December 23rd. Attempted coercive confession and retaliatory accusation against Catherine Ellison. Every date sat there in black and white, cold as steel. Richard didn't look at the screen. He looked at me. "You've always been dramatic." I almost smiled. When men like him run out of facts, they reach for temperament. Naomi continued as if he hadn't spoken. Tab 2 contains the LLC formation documents. Tab 3 contains transfer records approved through a device override initiated by your son, Derek Ellison, on December 20th, after Mr. Ellison instructed IT to reset Catherine Ellison's access token. Derek jerked upright. I didn't know why he wanted the override. Naomi turned a page. "That may become relevant later." Harold leaned forward. "You are making broad inferences out of internal accounting decisions and one social media video." Luis clicked again. The wall filled with split-screen images from Paige's livestream, enlarged and timestamped. A jeweler's bag, the permit packet, the reflection in the mirror, the invoice clip, the stocking initials, then the loading dock footage, then the delivery manifest, then still photos of those same light fixtures installed in Vanessa Cole's condo, photographed from the building across the river 2 nights later. Paige shut her eyes. Naomi said, "Would you like to revise inferences?" Harold's jaw tightened. Even if funds were misallocated, that doesn't establish intent. Louise clicked to the next slide. Audio waveform. Transcript beneath it. Move it before Catherine notices. Use the holiday line item if you have to. Nobody questions Christmas spending. Judith made a broken sound and covered her mouth. Richard's face stayed still, but the color under his skin seemed to recede by degrees. He looked older in that light. Not softer, just less invincible. That recording was made without consent, Harold said. Naomi's voice remained level. In Illinois, one-party consent would be a problem. Fortunately for us, it was made in Indiana during a vendor retreat your client categorized as deductible. We've checked. Derek turned to our father slowly, as though the movement hurt. Tell me this is fake. Richard didn't answer. That was the first fracture. It widened when Naomi reached tab 6. In addition to the financial diversion, she said, we have evidence the Blackstone unit was positioned as a personal gift financed through concealed corporate expenditures. We also have documentation that Mr. Ellison intended to propose there on Christmas Eve. Page's head snapped up. Harold stared at Richard. You did not tell me there was a personal component. Richard's voice came out flat. It's irrelevant. Is it? Naomi said. And then the door opened. Everyone looked up. Vanessa Cole entered with her own attorney. If Page was curated beauty, Vanessa was expensive control. Dark hair pinned low at the nape, camel coat belted perfectly, pearl studs, face composed in the way people get when they have spent all night choosing dignity over collapse. She carried a slim document case and a fury so quiet it changed the temperature of the room. Richard rose halfway out of his chair. Vanessa! She didn't look at him. Her attorney introduced himself, then sat beside Naomi with the clean efficiency of someone who had coordinated this in advance. Vanessa took the last seat at the table and placed one hand flat on the walnut. Her nails were short and bare. Harold looked from Richard to Vanessa to Naomi. What exactly is happening here? Naomi answered. Your client's co-conspirator is now a cooperating witness. The word landed like a body. Richard stood fully this time. Absolutely not. Vanessa turned to him then, and the expression on her face was not heartbreak. It was recognition. You told me the condo was clean, she said. Her voice was soft, but there was no softness in it. You told me it was purchased through a separate investment entity. You told me the holiday invoices were branding costs for the showroom launch, and that your daughter's concerns were jealousy. Richard opened his mouth. She kept going. You also told me that if anything ever came out, your bookkeeper would take the fall because she'd signed enough to make it believable. She slid a stack of printed messages across the table. I brought screenshots. Judith let out a strangled noise and turned to him, horror replacing fear. You said I was protected? Richard snapped. Stop talking. No, Vanessa said. I've done enough of what you told me. That was the second fracture. Derek shoved back from the table, so abruptly his chair legs screeched against the floor. There was a woman. A condo. A proposal. While you were telling everyone we couldn't even have Christmas dinner. Paige stared at Richard like she was trying to find the father she thought she had somewhere inside the man in front of her and failing with every second. Harold rubbed a hand over his mouth. Richard, I need to know immediately if there are other undisclosed transfers. Richard rounded on him. You work for me. Harold's laugh was brief and disbelieving. Possibly not much longer. Naomi let the room burn for a beat before speaking again. Timing mattered. So did silence. I let the implications settle over the table until nobody could pretend they weren't choking on them. Then Louise brought up the final segment of a timeline. August 28th. Lender covenant warning issued privately to Richard Ellison. September 2nd. Catherine Ellison requests variance explanation. September 5th. Richard Ellison begins limiting Catherine's access to live accounting dashboards. September 12th. North Candle formed. October 14th. Private jeweler consultation booked under alias R. Ellis. November 6th. Email from Richard Ellison to Judith Klein. Need year-end picture clean before Kate starts asking legal questions. December 20th. Device override requested in Catherine's name. December 23rd. Public accusation staged in family home with prepared confession document. Derek looked at the last line, then at me. You knew he was going to do that. Yes, I said. Paige blinked. Then why did you go? I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were rimmed red. She hadn't done her usual contouring. There was something painfully young in the way she held herself now, as if posture alone could keep her from folding. Because I wanted witnesses, I said. Richard laughed once, but it sounded frayed. You manipulative little. I wanted you all to see him, I said, still looking at Paige. And I wanted him to say it out loud. That was true, but it wasn't all of it. I turned back to Richard. I also made sure you'd find exactly what I wanted you to find. Derek frowned. What does that mean? The freeze notice, I said. I never intended the temporary hold on North Candle to stay internal. I wanted you to panic. I wanted you to use my credentials improperly. I wanted you to move fast enough to expose who you'd pull in with you. Harold stared. You baited them. I met his eyes. I documented them. Richard's hands curled against the back of his chair. You set me up. No, I said. You built the trap. I just stopped warning you where the floor was. Naomi slid a term sheet across the table toward Harold. Here are the alternatives, she said. Option 1, immediate cooperation. Richard Ellison resigns as CEO and as trustee with no severance. Derek Ellison is suspended pending a full operational audit. Judith Klein provides sworn cooperation in exchange for our recommendation of limited prosecutorial consideration. Full restitution is made to the company and trust from personal assets, including liquidation of the Blackstone unit and associated jewelry purchases. Ms. Ellison receives temporary financial oversight authority alongside an independent monitor. A formal disclosure package goes to the lender by close of business. Vanessa Cole's affidavit is attached.